Hi, Phil Booth, National Coordinator at NO2ID. I just want to talk a bit about the government consultation document on the digital ID scheme and going to pick out a few sort of important details. The paper as a whole, I'm afraid to say, is actually quite deceptive. I'd say in some parts actually dishonest. And it's certainly written to distract people from certain facts and from the overall big picture. I congratulate whoever wrote it, though. They are a top-notch propagandist. This document treats things that are bound together as if they're somehow separate. Yeah? The most obvious example of this is the way in which government is talking about things being mandatory or not. Yeah? One login, the login part of the process, is mandatory for certain things. For millions of people right now, company directors have to have a verified one login to file their returns at Companies House. Yeah? The checks are also mandatory. They are a legal requirement. Otherwise, you can be fined or even have your company shut down. But then the government is saying somehow this digital ID, which is embedded in this one login sequence, is somehow a choice, not compulsory. That's ridiculous. Also, this document does not clearly state or indicate that the number is key. The ID number is key. They talk about the digital ID and they list the pieces of information that might be on the digital ID, and they simply do not mention the number. And very deceptively, they say, we are considering a unique identifier, when anyone who knows about the architecture of ID systems knows that they basically fundamentally boil down to assigning a number to a person, to locking that number to a person. And we see this in some of the schemes which the government refers to, like the Aadhaar system in India, where everyone has been assigned a number. As is usual, as we're very, very familiar with, the document sells the benefits, but it says the good bits, if you like, the bits it wants you to want, but it leaves the obvious bad bits out. Yeah. What it does do is dump some of those really quite concerning issues into the sort of the final part, the final chapter, so they can get it all down in one go, like a bitter pill. They are suggesting that they will make key design decisions after this consultation. But it's quite clear that most of the key design decisions of the overall ID architecture have already been made, and hundreds of millions, over £300 million, have already been spent on the one login system and associated parts. So it's not just decisions have been made, they've been built and they are being imposed on people. Yeah? I mentioned company directors. That's about, I think, 8 million people in this country who now, as of last November, are forced to get a biometrically verified one login account in order to do the things that they are legally required to do as company directors. If we compare that with the veterans card that the government announced shortly after Starmer stood up, well, we see that that's actually got what they call very slow take-up. It's sort of voluntary and no one really wants it. But the reason, or one of the reasons why, is because it's actually useless. It hasn't got what the government refers to in this document as programmatic verification. It is really just a card. Yeah? And veterans get those cards anyway, so it really hasn't added anything to just put it in an app. There are other sort of deceptive things that they say, like the NCSC, the National Cyber Security Centre, will be involved in this from the outset. Well, how is that possible? We're just talking about the design of the ID, which sits inside a multi-part architecture, ID architecture that has already been built. And we see people from GCHQ and even the intelligence and security services coming out and saying there are real problems with this. I'll put some links in so that you can see what they've said. But your digital ID is explicitly going to be linked to this one login sequence. Yeah? At the heart of it is that you are going to be assigned a number, and then the consequences build out from that. I'll do another video where I'll explain this in more detail, but what they are saying are things as, frankly, crazy as, I'll quote them directly, "For clarity, references in this section to consent are not intended to be read as references to consent as defined under the UK GDPR." They are literally saying, when they talk about consent in this document, it's not consent as defined by the law. That seems ridiculous to me. Absolutely ridiculous. It also claims that this thing is going to be trusted. Well, in order for something to be trusted, you have to be honest about it, open and honest about it from the start. Yeah? You have to, actually say what the thing is and explain it clearly. Yeah? The way they're designing this thing, hiding certain bits of compulsion further up the pipeline, if you like, and saying, we're just designing this bit, this is what, it's what really sort of matters is the digital ID, but they're not mentioning the number that is essential to it. You can see they're already being quite evasive, and I think deliberately so. Yeah? So what have we got here? We've got something which is being presented as joining up the public services or improving them, when in fact we know that actually identifying yourself, although it's important, is just the first step in getting a service. The digital ID isn't going to have all of those other bits that you have to provide to fulfill the sort of big bureaucratic forms. It's just one step in the process. Yeah? They want to use the number, possibly even without telling you, to join up all their databases behind the scenes. And we've already seen what happens when they do that with, most recently, the child benefit debacle, where HMRC took away 23,000 families' child benefit because they relied on imperfect, inaccurate Home Office data that turned out they were incorrectly targeting over 70% of the people who they took their child benefit away from. Yeah? Joining up government, which is what they're saying they want to do, has serious consequences if what you're joining up is already flawed and dangerously flawed. We even see, they say it's going to be secure. We've even seen this one login, this verified one login, when some of those company directors are using it and they log in to fill in their details. Just last week, someone found that they could put in another company's details, hit the back button on their browser a few times, and start editing someone else's company details. This supposedly secure one login, rather than preventing fraud in that particular way, enabled fraud. They are making claims that they are already proving are wrong. Yeah? I would say, please do read this. Yeah? I mean, it's a long document, and I'll try to put out things, as many colleagues are, and many people, experts who are advising me and NO2ID will do. But please do pay attention to this, because it's going to affect you. It's going to affect your children. It's going to affect your grandchildren if this thing actually comes to be. Because in a system where they're going to assign you a number, then they're not actually properly talking about, and present it as if it's good for you and gives you more choice and control, when in fact you won't have a choice and you have far less control, is, I think, as I've said, dishonest and deceptive. Don't be distracted. Read it, learn about it for yourself, and then together we're going to stop it.